Good afternoon, Kishan.
Good afternoon, Floris.
Today we're going to talk about the NIS2 and the Dutch Cybersecurity Act. We have an article of a law office in the Netherlands that wrote something about the implementation. It is, and obviously, legal is not our forte, but as it definitely impacts our customers, it definitely impacts the systems of our customers and the infrastructure. The NIS2 then is coming into effect on August the 15th, and 18 sectors are designated specifically in NIS2. And I think depending on in which sector an organization is active and the size of the organization, that makes you fall into NIS2 if you need to be obligating with the requirements in NIS2. I think it is, of course, essential and important that this type of stuff happens. We looked into this article and saw some caveats. I think definitely when it comes to software modernization and legacy systems, and I think we talk a bit about what effect has NIS2 and specifically the Dutch Cybersecurity Act. What kind of effect does that have on the type of work that we do with software modernization and application modernization? What stands out in this article, according to you, Kishan? What did you see?
There's a lot of sectors and companies involved in this. There, especially here in the Netherlands right now, we have not a lot of time to adhere to this, but also it's not only the bigger companies that need to do this, it's also smaller companies that do significant or important work in specific sectors. So even if you're a smaller company that does, for example, domain management or web hosting for other companies, you're also required to adhere to this. So it has big implications for basically being in control of what you have and the hygiene of your application landscape, but also your people and everything around it regarding information security.
In essence, obviously, Eli5 is not a security firm, IT security firm, or cybersecurity firm. We only play a role when a certain application needs to be modernized or is perhaps identified as vulnerable and needs to be modernized. What I found interesting is that this whole article of this law office, it left out a couple of important aspects. I think obviously because it's a summary and the real PDFs that I have here are quite large. It is obviously law, and they wrote down as much as possible, I think, as they do. But what I found interesting in one of the is that you need to identify as an owner or as an owner of the company or management of the company, which applications are there in your application landscape, what's the infrastructure, and if the supplier still exists, if the supplier is able to keep the product up to date and such. So I think in the past you have also experienced incidents, or at least you identified or you had experience with not being able to have a complete overview of the applications and infrastructure because no one has that, or there's some system or server somewhere that someone has. Is only monitoring or having an overview of your assets, is that a difficult thing to have, or?
I think for any company that deals with a varied landscape of applications or systems, it's becoming a problem. It always has been a problem, but right now you can get slapped on the wrist, but also even worse, on a management level, get some actual repercussions if you don't have that in check. And it always has been a problem. The name Shadow IT exists for years, and it's always because something people want to accomplish a certain level of efficiency, or they want to use certain types of applications, and they will do it outside of the scope of IT or managed IT that is in the company. And the moment they run that, you are basically in violation of this, because as on a management level, on a senior level, you don't know about this. These people probably won't tell you that they run things on the side, but you're still responsible for whatever is there. And if there is company data or personal data put into a different system that you don't know about, it's a pretty big violation. And right now, with NIS2, it will have repercussions at a management level as well.
I think NIS2 identifies, or you should identify your assets, which is one thing. With Shadow IT, it's difficult because an individual made that and didn't really make it public that he or she made that. You need to have identified. If you don't, you're in violation. And second, there needs to be someone who maintains it, is able to maintain it and maintains it, an owner of that application, which you then also don't have in the overview. I think is in a sense NIS2 also a quiet killer to vibe coding for individuals inside an organization, or do you see opportunities or ways that would be enabled?
If it would be enabled, it would need to be enabled from an IT organization perspective, so that there is a platform that is company specific where people can build these things, and those have insights, or the people that are managing the IT have insights into what is being built. Right now, anyone can spin up a Claude session or a ChatGPT session and build whatever they want without anyone knowing. and nobody even knows what data is going through that code application. Opportunities, yes, opportunities for companies to make a platform and deliver a platform to their users where they have control of what's being put there and also oversight and governance. But it makes things harder or harder to control because right now, as I said, anyone can spin up anything without much effort. And especially because it's so easy to, for example, put something on Vercel, which you don't control, on a free plan without any credit card. If I right now wanted to make a clone of our project management software and put that on Vercel, but also load in our legacy archive of tickets, which may contain screenshots or may contain data that is from production, I'm also in violation.
When would something, we probably should read the specific subsections of the text, but just speculating or speaking from experience, but at what point in time does something become an asset in a sense of, I suppose everyone can have a subscription on Vercel, if maybe even if it's allowed by the company, by the organization, but when does it become something becomes an asset? Is that when you add the company data, you think, or?
I think an asset is when you create something in a company environment. That's my perspective. If you create something in a company environment, it becomes an asset of the company, regardless of if it contains any data that's relevant or not. And an asset is something somebody controls, right, or has control over. And in a company perspective, anything you do from your work laptop or work computer that you create is basically an asset of that company, even if you spin up a trial version somewhere.
Coming back to the text of Law and More, but also the two legal texts, the text that was written down for the Cybersecurity Act, both of the texts we analyzed and specifically searched for modernization, legacy systems, end of life, and strategies around these things. Nothing came up. So they specifically don't say anything about legacy applications or infrastructure. Why do you think that is?
I think they want to control the outcome, but not the way towards that outcome. So what they are giving you is what they expect to happen, and how you make that happen is completely up to you. If you choose to refactor your application to adhere to, for example, the multi-factor authentication standard, it's up to you. If you want to replace it by something else, also up to you. The fact of the matter is that you need to adhere to this list of items if you belong to one of these sectors. How you do it doesn't really matter to them. The only thing that matters is that you have it. If you don't have it, are in violation of this directive.
So let's dive into that a bit, like the strategies, so to speak. We at Eli 5 do strategies specifically for applications or platforms, but also more like on a strategic level, like a roadmap of what needs to be done in the coming years or months or years for like, the infrastructure and many applications within the infrastructure. I was wondering what you think about, suppose the security team has identified several systems, or let's take specifically one system. They identified a system with vulnerabilities, which is near end of life in the sense of support. Then what is the strategic option? What strategic options would you have as the one responsible for that application to stay compliant with NIS2, amongst others? What options do you have?
There are at least 6 different options for going towards a modernized application from a legacy application if you have no choice but to do a modernization step, right? Sometimes also the choice is to not do anything and just cut it off from everything around it and let it run. And a legacy application doesn't necessarily mean that you need to improve it. It's just you need to identify the risk of having it exposed somewhere. And if it's too much of a risk, then you would probably need to either cut it off or modernize it, right? So there's also systems that were built in the 80s, 70s, or 80s that still run, that have no contract with the outside world whatsoever, run on a contained machine, no need to modernize it. But if we are talking about public-facing or internet-facing systems, this thing becomes a lot more in scope and a lot more. There's a bigger attack factor because it's visible for other people. So there's many options, but the most common ones are either refactoring it. So let's say you have a end-of-life application, you can also choose to update what you need to update and restructure what needs to be restructured to make it adhere to the non-end-of-life version. So maybe there's a new version of the underlying platform that you need to upgrade to, and refactor parts of the application to adhere to that new standard to be at that new long-term LTS version. You can rebuild it completely, which is the most invasive option, but also the most greenfield option, because you would basically need to rebuild everything from scratch. So you have complete freedom. You just need to adhere to these contracts that it needs to do everything the old system does, which is also the big part of the complexity, or you replace it with something else. So if it's a legacy system, you can also choose to replace it by a commercial or SaaS solution. So there are more options, but those I think are the most common ones, because it's either keeping what you have and improving upon it, which needs manpower, just completely losing it and replacing it with something else, which needs buying power, or refactoring, which needs planning and oversight and also manpower to the engineering team to actually do these changes.
And talking about the engineering team, as we both know very well, the engineering team now uses language models within the development process, or at least supporting, I think, supporting LLMs in the organization and supporting specific development and many other facets of the development process. De facto, or at least NIS2 speaks a lot about the development and maintenance of systems. I suppose when you use a language model within the development process and it creates code, the developer and then the development party, therefore, is responsible for that code. How do you handle that? Because you mentioned already before in one of the talks that we had that it's sometimes impossible to review all code. And maybe that's different for vibe coded things that we use on the side and stuff that goes into production. But essentially, people use the language models to generate code. You can probably use a language model to audit the code, but a human needs to be in the loop and a human needs to probably review 100% of it for some of the clients. Is that the case, or what is the struggle here also in terms of the NIS2 responsibility that you have as a developer?
The problem is that if you let everything run by AI, you still have the human responsibility because this applies to a company which is ultimately run by people. So ultimately, humans are responsible for whatever is being put out there by the AI is running. If you are completely detached from the whole process, then you don't even know the problems that exist. Even if you let an agent run and check another agent's work, it's up to your standards of what the agent needs to check if it's going to check that. And if you don't supply it with the correct guardrails and the correct identifications of what you expect it to be, it also won't probably check it by itself unless you have some specific cybersecurity and OWASP agent that does it because it was trained to do that. But it ultimately becomes your own responsibility. So from my perspective, in our engineering team, we ship things using AI, but we keep things scoped and we are always in control. But I also learned that there are companies that just put in tickets and let the loop run forever, and they don't even look at the code. That's also an option, but then ultimately you don't know what's out there, so you also don't know the exposure. But then again, humans make errors as well. These are also sometimes there's a lot of incidents that happen because there are bugs in the code that people wrote. So it's not a black and white thing, right? Even if a person looks at it, they can overlook things, and you can still prove that.
I think two thoughts on this. I think you shared with me also, or sort of a certification within like the AI. Not sure how they called it. Is it an ISO norm also?
Yeah, it's an
Yeah,
ISO norm, yeah.
yeah, ISO norm. Yeah, for probably it covers secure development also in terms of AI usage, right? Or
It's basically it's the standard for establishing, implementing, and maintaining an AI management system. Basically, the standard on working with AI and addressing the challenges of working with AI, whether being ethically, transparency, or learning, and mitigating the risks of that and balancing it with the governance that you have as a user of AI.
I think, and it's very likely probable that this type of certification or assessments will be an obligation of companies like ours in the near future, right? Or at least it's not so much any nice to have, but it is, I think, almost a should have for us in the near future, which you also mentioned. It could really help us also to prove that we are compliant with certain rules and regulations.
It at least proves that if we are going that route, which I think is very usable for a company like ours that works with AI daily and also has things in production using AI, that we think about the usage of AI, the implications of it, but also that we work ethically with it.
So I think a question, maybe looking into the future a bit, also with a company that we're likely going to work with called Compar, which monitors I think they monitor the infrastructure also, or can monitor the infrastructure, but definitely applications and code within the applications, within the application. Do you think, or startups like these could really support and assist, like having the overview of what you have, and if it's like, because I saw specifically in one of the subtexts that they say, if you don't know what you have, you cannot test if it's compliant, and therefore you're really screwed, so to speak. So you really need to know what you have. I think I saw an opportunity in like working with these companies like Compar that have a direct link or a monitoring system for the infrastructure and the applications that could really help. Or probably there are Hyatts also there, because always an individual could spin up a new asset. But is this something in the direction that you think things should run?
It certainly helps. It continuously checks whether the application is up to date, what is there, what is being installed, what the exposure is, and how to make things better. Yeah, I think it's a very valuable thing to teams that maintain applications. Yeah, definitely.
I think we need to invite Jouke also to one of these reviews, and then we can go through some of his features, which are very helpful, I think, also in the modernization process. We'll get back to that. For this article, NIS2 and the Dutch Cybersecurity Act, do you have anything more to add, or shall we just call it a day?
I don't think there's more to add. It's just that I think it's a good thing that we are getting into a space that is more giving companies that do a lot with our data that we might not know about, to give them actual rules and regulations to adhere to regarding information security. Because as we saw in the past few months, especially with supply chain attacks, so attacks that happen because you use other people's software or rely upon other people's software, you are vulnerable without you even knowing that you are vulnerable. Your software can be as secure as it can be, but the moment you rely on something from somebody else, you're basically exposed. Because what happened with this whole supply chain attack is that the ultimate developer of your dependency got hacked, or their token got hacked. They pushed a new version of the application that was infected, and basically the whole downstream that downloaded that is also infected. So you can work as securely as you want without having scanning, or at least some mitigations for depending on other people's software, which everyone does. I don't think in the modern age, especially in web development, there's nobody that doesn't rely on anybody's software. It's critical. And even today, or yesterday, I got an email that there was an attack with leaked data from a big logistics party here in the Netherlands, which basically has everyone's data because they ship packages to our houses.
Yeah.
So, and that's not even the companies that are using these third parties are basically sending them their data. And that's the whole thing. You're relying on somebody else to do the work properly. If that person got vulnerable or got hacked, then your data is also exposed there.
Clear. Okay, we will be following up on this too, and software modernization and application modernization. Thank you for your time, Kishan.
Thank you for this.